Now, F1 pre-season testing starts tomorrow, and the 4 days in Barcelona should reveal whether Ferrari have closed the gap on Mercedes. And it's a big day too for a new team on the grid.
New American team Haas able to launch on the eve of testing. A sign they're in good shape. Their target is debut season points. Will testing reveal Haas ahead of McLaren? If they are, might Fernando Alonso yet take a year off? He praised the sleek looks of his new car, but key to its success is a better Honda engine. Did McLaren's launch release, with repeated mentions of its exclusive Honda deal, issue a hands-off warning to Red Bull?
Could Ron Dennis still block you getting a Honda power unit for 2017?
We've got meetings next week in Geneva to go through those rules and regulations for 2017. So your guess is as good as mine.
If this year's transitional for Red Bull, Ferrari want a title challenge. At launch, designer James Allison trumpeted better horsepower, downforce, handling, a car that was better everywhere. Sebastian Vettel has cast Ferrari as the team to rescue F1 from, in his words, Mercedes' damaging dominance.
I don't know if he really did say it, but if he did, I mean, would be pretty funny because he had 4 years of it, so I've only had 2. So until I get to his level, then I wouldn't have bought him as much as he has.
Here we go. What an awesome feeling. First lap with the new Silver Arrow.
All the talk will be drowned out this week anyway, as the new, louder V6 engines take over. After an 85-day wait, F1 is back. Craig Slater, Sky Sports.
So the team's starting to show their hands ahead of the new season, and Sky Sports News HQ will be live reporting from all 4 days of the first pre-season test in Barcelona starting tomorrow. You can also follow the action via a live blog on the Sky Sports website.
Formula One testing begins this morning in Barcelona, and we'll bring you the action throughout the week. We can go now to the Circuit de Catalunya. Rachel Brooks is there for us. Rachel, very good morning.
Good morning, Mike. And this is what happens at testing when a car is being launched, and particularly a car that is hoping to beat the world champion by the end of the season. I'm going to get out of the way, and my cameraman is going to show you what all the fuss is about, because it's much more interesting. And as he moves in, you will see under the wraps there the W07. It's Mercedes Challenger for the 2016 season as they prepare. Nico Rosberg popped out a moment ago, just trying to see over everyone's heads if he's still there, but he'll be out in a second with Lewis Hamilton to reveal their Challenger. We've seen some pictures of it online, Mike, but it's worth remembering that its predecessors won 32 of the last 38 Formula One races. Mercedes have really dominated this sport since the regulations changed and got to grips with these new hybrid engines. It won 16 of 19 races last year and took 18 pole positions. Just Singapore beat them last year in terms of taking that very front spot on the grid. The quickest car on the track for the last 2 years, and they're hoping this will be more of the same this year. Looking for more of a challenge from Ferrari, who launched their car last week. But of course, when we get to 8 o'clock your time, 45 minutes time, we will see the cars on track for the first time and start to get an idea of just how much Ferrari have managed to make a step over the winter. But you'd have to say Mercedes have definitely had the best technical package for 2 campaigns now. Regulations stable, which mean just small tweaks, such as raising the sides of the cockpit. Look out for that on this Mercedes when they take the covers off, just by the driver's head. That's for safety reasons. And also we're going to keep a keen eye on the back of the cars this year, Mike, too, because there are some changes to the exhaust and what's known as the wastegate. But you'll be hearing a lot more of that over the next few days, Mike.
Rachel, Formula One always changes every season. Are we going to expect significant changes again this year?
No, Mike, the regulations are stable, as they call them at the moment. So in terms of big changes, we were looking for 2017 for those big changes to come in, but the team still can't decide on those. So actually we may have these regulations again next year. We're waiting to find out exactly what's going to happen with the sport, because they all need to agree and come up with a plan for the future. As you see, Nico Rosberg, and Lewis Hamilton popped his head out a moment ago with his beanie hat on. It's quite chilly this morning, but it's going to get up to about 15 or 16 degrees by the middle of the day. But yes, the changes for this year, just to really, it's around the rear of the car as well we need to have a look, because the exhausts, they've had to change them now, and there'll be more than one exhaust you'll see exit at the back. It's called a wastegate, but I'll let Ted Kravitz explain more of that later on today. So we're looking at the rears of the cars a lot for differences. They'll be a bit narrower at the back as well, a lot of them. McLaren was the narrowest car last year on track. Really, really tight package they had at the back of their car, and some of the other teams adopting that this year. But this is the car that everyone's been waiting to see in the flesh. We saw some pictures last night, and wondering whether or not the challenge will come from Ferrari this year, or maybe it's going to come from inside the team itself. Nico Rosberg there with his back to the car and his back to the cameras, but he really does have the pressure on him this year to try and win this World Championship from his teammate. Lewis has won the last two. Nico was up there in 2014 but dropped away last year. Lewis won it in Texas before Nico bounced back and won the last three races of the season in style. Was that a resurgent Nico Rosberg as he holds his hand up and waves to the cameras, or was it Lewis backing off? That's what we're all waiting to see. Who's going to start this season ahead? And Nico smiling for the cameras, but very aware that he's got a massive job to do this season, Mike.
Rachel, I was reading an article by Bernie Ecclestone this morning saying that Formula One is the worst it's ever been and he wouldn't pay to watch it. You're a Formula One fan. How worried should we all be when the boss man is saying things like that?
Well, Bernie Ecclestone always likes to make headlines, Mike, and let's not forget, this is the first day, really, of the 2016 season. And as we look at the drivers here, and they start to reveal this W07, have a good look at it, Mike. I'll talk to you about Bernie in just one moment, but as Lewis and his beanie hat and Nico take the covers off this car for this season, you'll see there aren't some major changes. I have Ted Kravitz nearby who will point some stuff out for us maybe in just one moment, but as you can see, holding there in the middle for the cameras to see the front of the car, and very, very keenly watched by members of other teams as well, have popped down to have a look at this challenge of the car they all want to beat on track this season, but it's going to be a massive ask for them. As they take those covers off in full, they'll pose for some more photos. You were talking about Bernie's comments, Mike, but he's drawn massive attention to the first day of the season, hasn't he? And he is the ringmaster, if you like, of the sport, and that's done exactly what he needed to do, is draw everyone's attention to Formula One this morning. It's At the moment, I think we have a period where one person is dominating, one team is dominating. We've seen it before with Sebastian Vettel in recent years with Red Bull, and Michael Schumacher, if you go back that far as well. And it's a period when people want to see challenges on track. No one wants to see the title won with 3 races still to go. And in that sense, he's saying that they need some more competitive sport. There are always reasons behind it. He wants to see some changes as well to the regulations, and he wants the teams to agree on it. So maybe that's a little bit more behind his comments, is that he's trying to encourage the teams. Come on, this is a fantastic sport, but right now we're making headlines not necessarily for the right reasons. Let's make them for the right reasons. Let's get together and agree on some regulations. But at the moment, the man in that photo, the picture you're seeing right now, won't be complaining. Lewis Hamilton, 3-time world champion, 2 back-to-back. He wants to make it 3 in a row this year. And the other man in that photograph, Toto Wolff in the middle. Andy Cowell on the far left of that photo, by the way, the man behind this engine, very much credited with a lot of this Mercedes success, and Paddy Lowe on the far right as well, who also makes sure that that engine and that car is the best performer on track. A force to be reckoned with, that team, to be sure. But as some sponsors and corporate guests come and join them for some photographs, I'm going to grab Ted Kravitz just for 1 second and speak to him about this, because we've seen pictures of this Mercedes, Ted. We've seen pictures of most of the cars now. I think it's just Force India left to reveal their 2016 car today, and Sauber at the next test. What have you made of the W07?
Well, just before we talk technical, reading some body language into this, just about 5 seconds ago, it was the first time I've seen Lewis Hamilton smile in this little presentation. Nico Rosberg came out, was greeting everybody, just making himself comfortable, and then Lewis came out, and I don't know, I mean, you could say he's looked focused, you could say he's looked concentrated about the day ahead, but this is the first time we've got to see, you know, who are going to be the prime contenders for this year, of course, along with Ferrari. And I've got to say, Rosberg looks the more relaxed. We can't read much more into it than that, but Hamilton knows from where we left off in Formula One in 2015, he is up against it. We left Abu Dhabi, didn't we, with Nico Rosberg on a string of wins, with Lewis Hamilton nowhere near winning a race. So I think this is going to be a crucial day for Lewis Hamilton. He's going to need a few days for Lewis Hamilton. He's going to need to understand whether this car suits him in a way that last year's car at the end of the season did not.
Well, we spoke to him at the end of last season, didn't we? There were talks about whether or not the car suited him. There were talks about changes that have been made since Singapore that didn't necessarily suit Lewis's way of driving. Was that the case? Or do you think, Ted Kravitz, that maybe he just backed off? He'd won his 3rd world title, job done, let's relax for the rest of the season?
I think it was 50-50. I think certainly he never admitted to backing off and job done, and there's no reason to go and give it 100% full beans, at least subconsciously. But still, there was something on the car that he didn't like. He said that very clearly at the end of the season, and I believe him when he said that. Of course, all that is now out the window. Last year's car is just a showpiece. This is now really the car that he needs to understand, and he needs to get to know. And he will know within 2 or 3 laps whether this year's car has the same suspension characteristics he didn't get on with last year, or whether it is, as he wants, a completely fresh start, and he can get back to doing what he does best, which is beating everybody else, including his teammate Nico Rosberg. But we'll see. That's what makes today so interesting for me.
It's going to be fascinating, and also body language is crucial at testing. Don't underestimate body language at this circuit. It's proved to be right in the last few years, for sure. Now, everyone is heading down to the right, which is down to Force India, which is where we're going, because they're about to launch their 2016 car. But we'll be with you throughout the day, and we'll see just what Lewis Hamilton makes of this car later on Sky Sports News HQ.
Rachel, Ted, Nico and Lewis, thank you.
What a business.
Now, we brought you Mercedes unveiling their new car in Barcelona. Now it's the turn of Force India. Let's go back to Rachel Brooks, who's there. Rachel.
Yes, Mike, and as you can see at the moment, the drivers lined up. Nico Hülkenberg closest to us here at the camera. In the middle there is Alfonso Celis Jr., who will be in the car today as he takes a step out of the picture. Sergio Perez alongside Nico Hülkenberg. Team finished 5th last year. This is their 2016 Challenger. That 5th place was their best result in the team's history. They first went into Formula 1 in 2008. They've had 150 races, and it was a fantastic performance from them last year. There was a podium for Sergio Perez in Russia. Now, this car, interestingly, last season when they came to testing, they only had the car from the year before to trial. They got through the first part of the season in a 2015 A-spec car, if you like, and they had to wait until Silverstone to get their hands on their 2015 car, which was the B-spec car, which was the one that both of them really enjoyed driving, actually. And they had a good second half of the season last year, so they're hoping that this is a step on from that, as well as the drivers take their seats on the wheels here. Sergio Perez finished 9th on 78 points. Teammate Nico Hülkenberg 1 place behind him, but 20 points behind. But they've got a stable lineup in this team now with their drivers, and both the drivers seem to feed off each other when it comes to performances. One gets ahead in terms of qualifying, the other one will then go and beat them in the race, and vice versa. And they scored their first points in the sport back in 2009. They're looking to improve on their position of 5th in the championship this year. Quite who they will beat ahead of them is quite a big question, because they've got the likes of Ferrari and Red Bull and Mercedes, of course, ahead of them in the championship, and Williams too. But they've got the Mercedes power underneath that chassis, and that is a massive benefit to teams at the moment since these new regulations came into place. And as the two drivers take their seats on the front of the car here, smiles all round today, but neither of them unfortunately driving, as I mentioned. Nico Hülkenberg will be in the car tomorrow and Sergio Perez on Wednesday, but it's the development driver who will be taking the first laps in this new Force India. The VJ M09, Force India's 2016 car, will take to the track in about 30 minutes time as we get underway for testing. Ted Kravitz will join me later on this morning once he's had a good look and a good listen to all these cars. We're told they should be about 12% louder this year, and we'll also, don't forget, have every session, every practice, every qualifying and every race live on Sky Sports F1 this year, with updates throughout the race weekends on Sky Sports News HQ.
Rachel, for the moment, thank you. Now, the first day of Formula One pre-season testing is underway in Barcelona, and there was a key moment before the session began when Mercedes officially unveiled their new car for the 2016 campaign. It is the W07. Can Lewis Hamilton see off the challenge of his teammate Nico Rosberg to make it a hat-trick of titles and claim a 4th World Championship? Such is Mercedes' dominance over the last 2 years. They won 32, or they've won 32 of the last 38 Grand Prix. New American team Haas F1 took the covers off their new car, the first American car in Formula One since 1986. Romain Grosjean and Esteban Gutierrez are the drivers. And Force India are already ahead of last year's schedule when they only really launched their car in mid-season. They'll be hoping this year's car can go even better than 2015 when they finished 5th in the Constructors' Championship. But it's all eyes on Mercedes, and Sky Sports F1's Ted Kravitz believes it's an important time for Hamilton after he was beaten by Rosberg in the last 3 Grand Prix.
I think certainly he never admitted to backing off and job done, and there's no reason to go and give it 100% full beans, at least subconsciously. But still, there was something on the car that he didn't like. He said that very clearly at the end of the season, and I believe him when he said that. Of course, all that is now out the window. Last year's car is just a showpiece. This is now really the car that he needs to understand, and he needs to get to know, and he will know within 2 or 3 laps whether this year's car has the same suspension characteristics he didn't get on with last year, or whether it is, as he wants, a completely fresh start and he can get back to doing what he does best, which is beating everybody else, including his teammate Nico Rosberg. But we'll see. That's what makes today so interesting for me.
Now, the first day of Formula One pre-season testing is underway in Barcelona. A big moment before the session began with Mercedes officially unveiling their new car for the 2016 campaign. Here it is, the W07. Can Lewis Hamilton see off the challenge of teammate Nico Rosberg to make it a hat-trick of titles and claim his 4th World Championship? Here it is. Such is Mercedes' dominance over the last 2 years. They're only beaten in the 6 Grand Prix. A new American teammate, Hans F1, took the covers off their new car. The first American car in Formula One since 1986. Roman Grosjean and Esteban Gutierrez, the drivers. Force India already ahead of last year's schedule, and they only really launched their car in mid-season. They'll be hoping this year's car can go even better than 2015. They finished 5th in the Constructors. Then nearly 3 months after the 2015 season ended, the cars took to the track, fitting late. Lewis Hamilton first out, followed by Julian Palmer in the new Renault. And 4-time world champion Sebastian Vettel is in action today. Ferrari hoping to sustain a genuine title challenge this year. Well, McLaren will be looking for more basic improvements after a season to forget in 2015. OK, let's go live now to the Circuit de Catalunya and join Rachel Brooks. Morning, Rachel.
Good morning, Rachel, and as you join me, cars out on track at the moment. It's a fairly busy morning session. We've just had Lewis Hamilton go past and Jenson Button, as you mentioned, in the McLaren. It's been a bit quiet for him, though. They got out for an installation lap and he was stuck inside their hospitality unit for quite a while. He was playing on an app on his phone where you can change your face and put someone else's face in yours. And I was wondering, I'm joined by Ted Kravitz now. Ted, could McLaren be hoping that they could change their car into someone else's, or do we think they might have made some improvements over the winter?
We haven't seen any improvements as yet, but certainly the car looks to be a nice development from last year's car, but there was nothing really wrong with the chassis in the first place. It was the Honda power unit that was the issue. So far it's a little bit difficult to say whether it's better or not, but what it is reliable. And I think that's the issue. This time last year, McLaren could barely get out of the garage to do 2 or 3 laps. Now it seems they can put a few runs together, and they're operating and have got several laps on the board already. So that is progress for McLaren. How much? We'll have to wait and see.
Okay. Well, we've seen a few launches this morning as well, but in terms of the first cars on track, the Mercedes went out and it stayed out.
Yeah, Mercedes doing what they always do, which is they're on top of their game anyway. They were class leading, and now it seems like they're reliable and they're fast as well. But then we've had the noise issue. Let's just hear the Mercedes as it comes through past us.
Louder?
Well, what they've done is that they've removed some tubing that went from the turbo wastegate into the exhaust pipe, and that was acting effectively as a silencer. And they've removed that now, and so I think the volume of the engine note is a little bit louder. Only a little bit. I'd probably say only 10 to 15%, which is what the experts from the teams are telling us anyway. But what hasn't changed is this turbo dull engine note.
This is the Toro Rosso, by the way, going past, which doesn't have its livery on at the moment. It doesn't have its colour scheme, if you like, for the season ahead on it at the moment, but that's just because they ran out of time to paint it, didn't they? It will be there.
Yeah, so to pick up, if anyone's expecting that this extra tailpipe, this extra exhaust pipe is going to lead to the screaming engine notes we were used to with the V8s and the V10s, I'm afraid they're going to be disappointed. It is a little bit louder, so if you're coming to the Spanish Grand Prix or any Grand Prix and you're a fan of the noise, then your ears will hurt a little bit more, but only a tiny amount.
And we've been in the pit lane this morning. in year one when we were in the pit lane, it was incredibly noisy. You needed your earpieces in as the cars went out. You still don't now.
No, exactly. So, yeah, as you said, we've seen the Toro Rosso here. It is the new car. Everyone is here, apart from the Sauber that we saw a little bit earlier. Sauber still say that even though they have got last year's car here, it is worth them coming. But Lewis Hamilton there, just the tiniest little bits of a lock-up going into the chicane. And the Ferrari, and this is really the key, isn't it, Rachel? This is going to be what makes a championship this year, is seeing what Ferrari can bring to the table. And Sebastian Vettel, I've seen him. He looks happy, he looks fit, he looks excited. He's excited with the progress that they've made. They've completely changed the Ferrari. It's a total new concept because they'd ran out of a development road last year, really. And they've gone back to a new suspension that we think Sebastian Vettel and Kimi Raikkonen like the feeling of. So I think Sebastian Vettel's optimistic that there'll be 2 teams and 4 drivers in this year's championship. And so we have to be optimistic too.
Well, we'll be talking to the drivers later on today. Lewis Hamilton in about an hour and a half's time, in fact. And I'll be looking out for the body language, because at testing here, no matter what they say to you on camera or what they try and put out in press releases, you can usually tell by the faces of the mechanics and the drivers whether or not they're in for a long season or a good season. So we'll be keeping an eye out on them. But yes, very keen to see Ferrari, Mercedes switching places at the top of the timesheets at the moment on those timesheets. They're not really crucial here. They don't really tell us the full picture, but it is interesting to see. So join us a little bit later on as the Force India goes past to hear just what Lewis Hamilton has to say about this year's 2016 Mercedes.
Thanks, Rachel.
It's all about the body language, a bit like in here.
And Lewis Hamilton is quickest so far on the first day of pre-season testing in Barcelona. A big moment before the session began with Mercedes officially unveiling their new car for the 2016 campaign, the W07. Can Lewis Hamilton see off the challenge of his teammate Nico Rosberg? Well, Hamilton won 10 races last season as he made it back-to-back World Championships. Can he make it 3 in a row and claim his 4th career title? He'll be looking to reassert his dominance over Rosberg after being beaten into 2nd place in the last 3 races of 2015. Ferrari are seen as the main threat to Mercedes. Sebastian Vettel won 3 times last season and has completed 20 laps so far. And like last season, Force India were able to unveil their new car for the season today. It was midway through the 2015 campaign before they were able to run a completely new car. Development Alfonso Celsus Jr. gave the chance to drive the new car today, ahead of Sergio Perez and Nico Hülkenberg.
I'm quite confident and, looking ahead to this season, because 1 year back things looked a lot more difficult, and now, starting with this car, of which we know that was very competitive at the end of last year, is a nice feeling. So yeah, hopefully some good challenges and battles ahead.
And Renault are back in Formula One as a works team for the first time in years after taking over the Lotus team. British former GP2 champion Jolyon Palmer driving today. He set the 9th quickest time.
OK, let's bring you some news just into us from FIA.
Lewis, so far?
That's an important day in the history of American Formula One. The Haas team with their launch in the pit lane this morning. It's the first American entry in F1 since 1986. Romain Grosjean's behind the wheel. He's had a few issues today, including losing his front wing down the pit straight, causing the session to be stopped briefly. So far, Lewis Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel traded fastest laps in the morning session of F1 pre-season testing. Hamilton was the first car on track and completed 66 laps before the lunch break, and he's been talking to Rachel Brooks.
Lewis, how are you feeling? Did you have a long enough winter to recharge? A lot of us thought it was quite a long winter, but have you had enough time off?
Yeah, I've had a great time. Good enough break. It's nice to be back, that's for sure.
What's your feeling? You've had a morning in the car so far. What's your feeling about this car?
It feels very much the same as last year's car, to be honest. There's a few little bits here and there, but otherwise it's generally the same. It's an evolution of last year's car, so I think that's a positive. And the fact that in the first day we've already done 60 laps, I think that's that's a very, very encouraging for us, because normally in the first day you always have problems here and there with the car stopping. So fingers crossed that will continue.
Do you still have that feeling you had at the end of 2015, though, where you weren't quite as happy as with the car after the changes were made to the suspension? Is that feeling still there for you?
It's difficult really to say, to be honest. It all feels a bit new. I've not been in the car for ages, so I can't particularly remember what the feeling was back then, but it's when we start to push the car, start to get the car in the setup zone, which we have not done yet, is when perhaps we'll find out.
And you probably haven't seen any other lap times yet. I imagine you've been working hard on your own, but were you expecting the main challenge to come from Ferrari this year?
That was the talk from everyone, so yeah.
So F1 is back, and it looks like Mercedes and Ferrari are lining up to do battle already after the first morning of testing. Lewis Hamilton traded fastest laps with Sebastian Vettel on the first day of pre-season testing in Barcelona. A big moment before the session began, with Mercedes officially unveiling their new car for the 2016 campaign, the W07. And Lewis Hamilton see off the challenge of teammate Nico Rosberg. Hamilton won 10 races last season as he made it back-to-back World Championships. Can he make it 3 in a row and claim his 4th career title? He'll be looking to reassert his dominance over Rosberg after being beaten into 2nd place in the last 3 races of 2015.
It feels very much the same as last year's car, to be honest. There's a few little bits here and there, but otherwise it's generally the same. It's an evolution of last year's car, so I think that's a positive. And the fact that in the first day we've already done 60 laps, I think that's a real good. That's a very, very encouraging for us, because normally in the first day you always have problems here and there with the car stopping. So fingers crossed that will continue.
Well, Ferrari are seen as the main threat to Mercedes. Sebastian Vettel quickest by more than half a second during the morning session. The biggest concern is at McLaren, and although they have shown improved reliability compared to this time last year, Eric Boulier gave a harsh assessment of this morning's session.
Not good enough. We don't have obviously the best mileage. We had a couple of issues in the car, and but yeah, it's definitely better. But we obviously suffered the pain 1 year already, so it's a minimum we can expect.
That's quite a concern if it's already not good enough at lunchtime on day one, though. Or was that to be expected? Do you expect the teething problems in the first morning session?
Testing is testing, okay? So yes, we have. I'm not saying it's a concern. Because we could run properly then for a number of runs, you know. It's just testing. We have to test. We have to make the car breaking down, to be honest. So no concern. Just make sure that we keep learning.
Well, unlike last season, Force India were able to unveil their new car for the season today. It was midway through the 2015 campaign before they were able to run a completely new car. Development driver Alfonso Celis Jr. given the chance to drive the new car today ahead of Sergio Perez and Nico Hülkenberg.
I'm quite confident and, looking ahead to this season, because 1 year back things looked a lot more difficult, and now, starting with this car, of which we know that was very competitive at the end of last year, is a nice feeling. So yeah, hopefully some good challenges and battles ahead.
Well, Renault are back in F1 as a works team for the first time in years after taking over the Lotus team. British former GP2 champion Jolyon Palmer driving today. He set the 9th quickest time. It's an important day in the history of American Formula One as well. The Haas team with their launch in the pit lane this morning. That's the first American entry in F1 since 1986. Romain Grosjean behind the wheel. He's had a few issues today, including losing his front wing down the pit straight, causing the session to be stopped briefly. Well, much of the attention in Barcelona centres on whether the new cars are noisier. Changes to the exhaust layout should mean that the cars will sound louder, but will that satisfy the purists?
If anyone's expecting that this extra tailpipe, this extra exhaust pipe, is going to lead to the screaming engine notes we were used to with the V8s and the V10s, I'm afraid they're going to be disappointed. It is a little bit louder, so if you're coming to the Spanish Grand Prix or any Grand Prix and you're a fan of the noise, then your ears will hurt a little bit more, but only a tiny, tiny amount.
Now the England head coach, Eddie, the one where not long to go until, of course, the start of the season. Rachel Brooks is at the Circuit de Catalunya for us. And Rachel, you've been speaking to some of the drivers today. What have they had to say?
Yes, Natalie. Yeah, usually we have to wait till the end of the day to speak to the drivers, and they all tend to do their media at the same time. So it's a case of running between them and trying to see who you can get to. But luckily for us, the Mercedes drivers spoke earlier on today. Lewis Hamilton using his lunch break time to great use, means he can get away earlier tonight. He spoke to us a little earlier on. Now, if you remember at the end of last season, he won the title in Texas, won his third world title, second in a row, and then the races from then on were won by his teammate Nico Rosberg. A lot of people saying, did he take his foot off the gas? Did he enjoy celebrating too much and maybe his mind wasn't on the track? But Lewis said to us that there were changes made to the suspension of the Mercedes that didn't suit his driving, and that's the reason why he lost those final 3 races of the season to his teammate. So I asked him today when we saw him whether or not he still had that feeling in the car that he had at the end of last season when he drove it around the track here at this circuit this morning.
It's difficult really to say, to be honest. It all feels a bit new. I've not been in the car for ages, so I can't particularly remember what the feeling was back then, but it's when we start to push the car, start to get the car in the setup zone, which we have not done yet, is when perhaps we'll find out.
They all look forward to being able to really push the car. So we'll wait and see what Lewis says after he's been able to do that on this track. But his teammate Nico Rosberg, of course, coming into it full of confidence. He knows he had the better of Lewis in the final 3 races of last season. But it does look as though Ferrari have made a step, and they've made a big conceptual step as well, because they've changed a lot about their car. You can do that if you're not the ones out in front leading the way. You've got more scope to do it, I guess, as well. And as Nico Rosberg explained to me, the other teams can copy and invent, while Mercedes are just inventing right now. So I asked him if he relishes the prospect of then a battle between the 3 of them, as opposed to a battle being just between him and Lewis. Could it be better for him in his title challenge if Sebastian Vettel is involved as well this year?
Ferrari for sure looking strong already, so definitely we're expecting them to be a big threat.
They're targeting the championship. There's no doubt Sebastian's going to be up there trying to win another one for himself as well. Do you welcome it being more of a 3-way battle? Does it make your job easier, do you think? I mean, you're obviously going for the title too. Does it make it easier if there are 3 of you fighting rather than 2?
It would be great if Ferrari is very, very close, as long as they're never in front of us.
Well, one team who aren't targeting the championship this year, much as they would like to be, is the team that I'm standing in front of here. I've got the McLaren Honda trucks behind me. I've got their hospitality unit in front of me. And if you have a look, this is one end of the paddock. Where the top teams are right down that end of the paddock. You can just about make out the silver of the Mercedes motor with the big black box on top of it, and beyond them, the blue of Red Bull. And those are the teams that are challenging at the top of the grid. This is where McLaren are this season. It's not a position they're used to being. They come after Renault, they're after Sauber, they're after Force India. Those are Manor racing trucks. To my left, all that's left is the newcomers, the Haas F1 team. And if you go into the pit lane, it's McLaren next to Manor in the pit lane at this end of the paddock, and something that is a result of their terrible 2015 season. It really wasn't good on track. They had an awful lot of problems in their partnership with Honda in terms of deploying the power from the engine that Honda had provided. McLaren insisted their chassis was good and their design was good. It was getting the 2 to work together effectively that was the problem. So when I spoke to Eric Boulier this morning, their racing director, and asked him what his first impressions were. The car's been out on track. It's been more reliable than this time last year. They only managed 6 laps on the whole first day last year. They did 36 in the mornings running, and I asked him what his first impressions were.
Not good enough. We don't have obviously the best mileage. We had a couple of issues in the car, and but yeah, it's definitely better. But we obviously suffered the pain 1 year already, so it's a minimum we can expect.
That's quite a concern if it's already not good enough at lunchtime on day 1, though. Or was that to be expected? Do you expect the teething problems in the first morning session?
Testing is testing, okay? So yes, we have. I'm not saying it's a concern because we could run properly then for a number of runs. It's just testing. We have to test. We have to make the car breaking down, to be honest. So no concern. Just make sure that we keep learning.
Well, you say testing is testing, but you do get an idea of just what sort of season you've got up ahead of you when you take the car out on track for the first time. So let's hope McLaren can see some positives in this and try to have a better season than they did last year. We already know that they're going to bring another of their 2016 engines, one very similar to this, but with some other parts on it, some new parts, different parts on it for the second test, and then an amalgamation of those two when they see what works will be what goes into the car for Australia. But in terms of this season, things are already signed off. For 2017, there is huge scope to change these engines, to change Formula One, and the team principals, the teams are all meeting tomorrow to try and thrash out proposals for 2017. I asked Christian Horner what he wants to take to the table.
I'm just hopeful that we don't end up in a compromise situation that is badly thought through, and you know, my view is either do the job properly or don't do it. And I think there's a golden opportunity to do something really good for the sport and you know, for the fans, and make the cars more demanding, more exciting, and spectacular. And it'd be a great shame to waste that opportunity. So hopefully everybody will have the right cereal in the morning and feel the same way.
Well, they've got to get a majority to agree to those plans. They'll try to thrash them out tomorrow. They've got until February the 29th to come up with something innovative, something interesting, something spectacular, as he says, for 2017. But for now, 2016 is pretty interesting here in Barcelona.
OK, Rachel, for now, thank you very much.
F1 is back, and Mercedes are genuinely wary of the threat posed by Ferrari. This with Sebastian Vettel fastest on day one of pre-season testing. A big moment before the session began, with Mercedes officially unveiling their new car for the 2016 campaign. Lewis Hamilton behind the wheel today. He completed more than 100 laps. Hamilton won 10 races last season as he made it back-to-back World Championships. The thing is, can he make it 3 in a row and claim his 4th career title? He'll be looking to reassert his dominance over Rosberg after being beaten into 2nd place in the last 3 races of 2015.
It feels very much the same as last year's car, to be honest. There's a few little bits here and there, but otherwise it's generally the same. It's an evolution of last year's car, so I think that's a positive. And the fact that in the first day we've already done 60 laps, I think that's a real good. That's a very, very encouraging for us, because normally in the first day you always have problems here and there with the car stopping. So fingers crossed that will continue.
Ferrari for sure looking strong already, so definitely we're expecting them to be a big threat.
They're targeting the championship. There's no doubt Sebastian's going to be up there trying to win another one for himself as well. Do you welcome it being more of a 3-way battle? Does it make your job easier, do you think? I mean, you're obviously going for the title too. Does it make it easier if there are 3 of you fighting rather than 2? It
would be great if Ferrari is very, very close, as long as they're never in front of us.
First of all, we are very happy that Ferrari looks to have a good car, and that's good. That could be a great battle between the teams, and then we just need to see how the season pans out. We've shown in the past that we are not big fans of team orders, and we are so far away of championship deciding decisions. So let's just get on. I can't wait for the flag to drop, and then those things are going to come much later.
Well, Mercedes say Ferrari are the threat, and Sebastian Vettel was quickest by more than half a second, although he completed half as many laps as Hamilton did. McLaren expect a significant improvement after what was, by their high standards, a disastrous 2015. Jenson Button with nearly a full race distance covered, but despite finding the reliability compared to last season, race director Eric Boullier appeared less than happy with the morning session.
Not good enough. We don't have obviously the best mileage. We had a couple of issues in the car, but yeah, it's definitely better. But we obviously suffered the pain 1 year already, so it's a minimum we can expect.
That's quite a concern if it's already not good enough at lunchtime on day one, though. Or was that to be expected? Do you expect the teething problems in the first morning session?
Testing is testing. Okay, so yes, we have. I'm not saying it's a concern. Because we could run properly then for a number of runs. It's just testing. We have to test. We have to make the car breaking down, to be honest. So no concern. Just make sure that we keep learning.
Now, Williams are one of the Mercedes customer cars. Consecutive third-place finishes in the Constructors' Championship means they are now regularly challenging for podium finishes. Valtteri Bottas, with the driving duties today, he posted the 4th quickest lap at the Circuit de Catalunya. Plenty to take in then for teammate Felipe Massa, who'll get his chance behind the wheel of the FW38 tomorrow. Renault back in Formula One as a works team for the first time in years after taking over the Lotus team. British former GP2 champion Julian Palmer driving today. He's nearly 7 seconds off the quickest time. It's an important day in the history of American Formula One. The Haas team, with their launch in the pit lane today, it's the first American entry in the F1 since 1986. Romain Grosjean behind the wheel. He's had a few issues today, including losing his front wing down the pit straight, which caused the session to be stopped briefly. Unlike last season, Force India were able to unveil their new car for the season today. It was midway through the 2015 campaign before they were able to run a completely new car. Development driver Alfonso Celis Jr. given the chance to drive the new car today ahead of Sergio Perez and Nico Hülkenberg. So while the teams continue testing, there is a key meeting tomorrow which could dictate the future direction of this sport. Rule changes for the 2017 will be discussed, and Christian Horner thinks it's a golden opportunity to broaden the appeal of the sport.
I'm just hopeful that we don't end up in a compromise situation that is badly thought through, and you know, my view is either do the job properly or don't do it. And I think there's a golden opportunity to do something really good for the sport and you know, for the fans, and make the cars more demanding, more exciting, and spectacular. And it'd be a great shame to waste that opportunity. So hopefully everybody will have the right cereal in the morning and feel the same way.
I'm very glad to be back. It feels like the longest winter ever. I'm also glad I didn't retire, because I will be going mad right now. So no, it's nice to be back here in this little world that we live in, and nice to finally get back into a Formula One car.
After your first day in the 2015 car, compare it to your first day in the 2016 car.
My neck's a bit more tired, to be fair, than the first day in the 15 car. So yeah, reasonable amount of laps today. You know, you still want to do more, but I think in general, you know, everything's run smoothly, reliably. You know, you have things that you want to take time with to make sure you do the change correctly and what have you. But no, everything's running a lot smoother, which is good.
An ominous message tonight for Mercedes rivals. World champion Lewis Hamilton has told us he's very encouraged by the first day of pre-season testing. This was a big moment before the session began, with Mercedes officially unveiling the new car. Hamilton was behind the wheel today. He completed more than 100 laps. And of course, Hamilton won 10 races last season as he made it back-to-back World Championships. He'll be looking to reassert his dominance over title rival and teammate Nico Rosberg after being beaten into second place in the last 3 races of 2015. Well, Mercedes say Ferrari are their main threat, and Sebastian Vettel was quickest by more than half a second, although he completed half as many laps as Hamilton. It's the second year in a row that Vettel has clocked the fastest time on the first day of testing. McLaren expect a significant improvement after what was, by their high standards, a disastrous 2015. Jenson Button covered a full race distance today, although the session wasn't without issues. Red Bull are expecting 2016 to be a transitional year. They only confirmed they would continue in the sport last November after threatening to quit after falling out with engine supplier Renault. They're running a rebranded Renault engine. Daniel Ricciardo, an encouraging third fastest. It was an important day in the history of American Formula One. The Haas team launched in the pit lane this morning. It's the first American entry in F1 since 1986. Romain Grosjean was behind the wheel, and he's had a few issues today, including losing his front wing down the pit straight, which caused the session to be stopped, albeit briefly. So, an eventful first day of testing in Barcelona. Our reporter Rachel Brooks is at the Circuit de Catalunya. Rachel, hi to you. Sebastian Vettel in the Ferrari ended the day quickest. So, were there any other surprises today?
Well, Jim, we know that Ferrari have been working really, really hard on this car over the winter. We know that they are, make no bones about it, targeting the championship this season. They want to wrestle that off the Mercedes team, so they've spent an awful lot of time trying to perfect this SF16H, as it's called, to try and make sure that they do top these timesheets. But let's be honest, the last 2 years they've done that on day one of testing. 2014 and 2015 they topped the timesheets when it came to testing, but still didn't manage to go on and win the championship, and in fact Mercedes ran away with it. When we look at what Mercedes have done today, though, they may not be top of the timesheets, but they are the most reliable. That car was on track for 156 laps today. Now, in kilometre terms, that's more than they did on the first day of testing last year in Jerez, so you could say they were even further ahead than they were at this point last year in terms of reliability. They've said themselves they've only been able to make small tweaks to the car, small changes, whereas Ferrari have made more radical changes. They've changed whole concepts in parts of their car. But elsewhere, I should say, we've got some flash photography going on because that's, I think, Fernando Alonso leaving. So just a quick warning on that front. But elsewhere, there were some surprises, yes. We've heard about McLaren this winter. They were talking about the brake horsepower they would increase, the time they would close in on the rest of the field. They finished just under 2 seconds off the rest of the field today, but they were on the quicker tyres, the quicker soft tyres. So it looks like they've got a lot of work to do. Now, I spoke to their racing director at lunchtime today after they'd been out for a morning session that had been a bit troubled, and he didn't really hide his disappointment.
Not good enough. We don't have obviously the best mileage. We had a couple of issues in the car, and but yeah, it's definitely better. But we obviously suffered the pain 1 year already, so it's a minimum we can expect.
We spoke to Eric at lunchtime, and I said, "What are your first impressions of the car?" And he said, "Not good enough." What are your thoughts, one, on his comments and your first impression?
Well, unless you think you have a car that can win the first race, you're going to think it's not good enough. So it goes for most of the field. So, yeah, I think it's a pretty standard day one. It's always very difficult to get a feel. You know, we say that on the first day you can get a good understanding, but it is tricky when the conditions are like this. And
now, Rachel, only one driver from each team tests the car each day. So I've been thinking, what have those who haven't been driving today been doing?
Well, a few of them have been here, Jim. We saw Max Verstappen keeping a close eye on Carlos Sainz in the Toro Rosso, which you might have missed, actually. It's not got its full colouring on it yet. It's full livery. It was just plain navy today, but he was keeping a close eye on what was going on. We also saw Nico Hülkenberg earlier on, and I spoke to him. He was watching the development driver, Alfonso Celis Jr., take the Force India around the circuit. Nico will get into the car on Wednesday himself to see just what he has to deal with this year. And also, we saw Nico Rosberg at the track today. Now, Lewis Hamilton had the car today. Nico Rosberg will get into it tomorrow, but he did get a chance to try it out at Silverstone when they had their filming day last week, so he knows what he's got this year to drive. And he also today saw Sebastian Vettel and the Ferrari go very well, so I asked him if it helps him. He obviously is going for the title this year. It's a really important year for him. I asked him whether or not it makes it easier for him in that battle if instead of being a two-way with his teammate, it's a three-way fight with Sebastian Vettel as well.
Ferrari for sure looking strong already, so definitely we're expecting them to be a big threat.
They're targeting the championship. There's no doubt Sebastian's going to be up there trying to win another one for himself as well. Do you welcome it being more of a three-way battle? Does it make your job easier, do you think? I mean, you're obviously going for the title too. Does it make it easier if there are three of you fighting rather than two?
It would be great if Ferrari is very, very close, as long as they're never in front of us.
Well, he'll have been very pleased to see Lewis Hamilton put all those kilometres into the car today. And they say when you come to testing, the aim is to try and break the car, essentially, see what goes wrong, fix it, and by the time you get to Australia, you're ready to race. Well, Nico will get in the car tomorrow. Lewis Hamilton didn't do his media tonight. Perhaps he's got something very important to get off to this evening, but he did do some media interviews at lunchtime. So after a morning's running of 60 or so laps, I spoke to him to ask him for his first impressions of the W07.
It's difficult really to say, to be honest. It all feels a bit new. I've not been in the car for ages, so I can't particularly remember what the feeling was back then, but it's when we start to push the car, start to get the car in the setup zone, which we have not done yet, is when perhaps we'll find out.
So the Mercedes drivers swap over tomorrow with Nico taking the wheel. Sebastian Vettel, Valtteri Bottas and Daniel Ricciardo will all get a second day in a row in their respective cars. We'll also see Fernando Alonso in the McLaren for the first time, and we know what happened here at testing last year. He had that awful accident and missed the first race in Australia. He'll get to find out just what that McLaren has when he goes around the circuit tomorrow. I'll be hoping to do more than the 6 laps that he did on day 2 in testing last year, but we'll see what happens when it all gets underway again tomorrow morning. We'll be here for live updates for you throughout the day and speaking to the drivers as well.
Terrific. We'll look forward to that, Rachel. Thank you. Arsene.
OK,
OK, Sebastian Vettel was quickest in Barcelona as F1 testing got underway for 2016. Lewis Hamilton was half a second adrift of the German, but completed over 150 laps. McLaren also posted a decent lap total, but racing director Eric Boulier isn't satisfied. He labelled their performance not good enough.
A young fan got a wave, and Lewis Hamilton declared himself happy to be back. Even if he hardly cracked a smile at his car's launch, he pounded round well over 100 times, more laps than anyone. The key question afterwards: had the niggling issues that plagued him at the end of last season been fixed over the winter?
It's difficult really to say, to be honest. It all feels a bit new. I've not been in the car for ages, so I can't particularly remember what the feeling was back then, but it's when we start to push the car, start to get the car in the setup zone, which we have not done yet, is when perhaps we'll find out.
Hamilton ended up half a second adrift of Sebastian Vettel, who was quickest at this point last year too. How fast could he go without a fence on his car? The Ferrari heavily censored after major aero changes.
The people leading the way, us, we can only, we can develop and we need to invent stuff. Whereas others, they can invent and copy, because they can learn from us.
If it was same old at Force India and at Williams, novelty this year included stubbier noses, a new American team, Haas, who showed solid pace, and a new look for Toro Rosso. Manor's new Mercedes engine sounded sickly initially, and Renault hit trouble, but reliability was better across the board compared to a year ago. Even McLaren boasted a decent lap total, although this was a rather gloomy day one verdict.
Not good enough. We don't have obviously the best mileage. We had a couple of issues in the car, but yeah, it's definitely better. But we obviously suffered the pain 1 year already, so it's a minimum we can expect.
Well, unless you think you have a car that can win the first race, you're going to think it's not good enough. So it goes for most of the field. So yeah, I think it's a pretty standard day one.
Fernando Alonso is due in that car tomorrow. If he doesn't like what he sees, will he want to be in it in Australia? Craig Slater, Sky Sports.
And you can catch